Hello, and welcome to Quick Crafts. I'm David. Do you like to watercolor? I do. It's one of my favorite things to do. And today we're going to go over some tips, tricks, and techniques so you can watercolor too. Before you begin to watercolor, you need to choose what paper you will use. You can always use regular printer or drawing paper and construction paper, but those are very thin and they do tear very easy. Cardstock and definitely watercolor paper are better choices because they absorb more water. Next, you will decide what paint to use. Paint trays of watercolor are pretty inexpensive and available almost everywhere, but you can also find liquid watercolor. You can find watercolor crayons or pencils, or if you don't have any of that, you could even watercolor using food coloring. Choosing your brush is the last important thing to consider. I like to use brushes that are smaller so I have more control, and with hairs that are flexible, because if they're too stiff, again, you don't have as much control. When you are ready to paint, you will of course need some water, and it's important to keep paper towels handy to make sure that you can clean your brushes in your area. If you're going to mix your colors, it's important to mix them in the lid and not in the coins themselves, so you don't muddy up the colors to make your new colors. Now, I'm going to show you a handful of techniques that you can try out using things you may have around the house. I'm going to do it briefly, but you're going to have all the time you need to experiment. But we're going to start with a wash. Using more water will have lighter colors, and using less water will give you darker colors. Dry brush is very little water. Wet on wet is when you have wet paint on wet paper or two wet colors together. Wet on dry is painting over lines or paint that has already dried. Blotting is when you apply paint but then pick some of it up with a towel. Tape masking is painting over tape you laid down, then removing it to reveal the white underneath. Plastic wrap is simply letting the paint dry with plastic on top, and it'll leave a really cool technique, but it may take a while to dry. A gradient is when you try to go from dark to light. Adding salt while it dries can leave a cool texture. Adding rice will also leave a unique texture when you let it dry on the paint. Adding oil can also leave a unique texture to your paint when it dries. Alcohol is a different material you can add to the paint on the paper for a different drying technique. Glue some salt onto your paper for another cool technique. Crayons resist watercolor pretty well and can often reveal a hidden image, as can oil pastels. Doilies are awesome stencils, but you can also cut your own out of paper. That's all that I have for today. I hope you had fun, and we'll see what kind of paintings you make. Bye.